Breaking news. There is no such thing as a perfect parent, a perfect child, a perfect sibling, a perfect friend, a perfect spouse. Sorry. Mistakes, conflict, struggles, and hurt are part and parcel of being a human in relationship with other humans. And we all know this. But many of us grew up in homes in which no one told us what to do next, after the conflict, after the hurt. Even though experiencing challenges with our partners, children, parents, and siblings, not to mention in-laws, is the most universal experience, most of us are not quite sure what meaningful repair looks like and how to do it. How do we move through conflict and heal from hurt with the people we love most? Do we push the feelings underground, pretend the hurt didn't happen, and try to move on? Or, if we choose to say something, which words are most helpful and contribute to healing? What conditions are most likely to result in true repair? Here's the good news. Yom Kippur rolls around every year as our reminder that a large part of why we are here on earth is to get better at repair, otherwise known in our tradition as teshuvah. And instead of being swallowed up by regret and shame as we take stock of the many ways we have fallen short with others, with God, with ourselves, we can actually practice or train in our capacity to do this most important and meaningful work. One of the best teachers in the business of repair for me this year has been clinical psychologist, mom of 3, author of the book Good Inside, and TED speaker Dr. Becky Kennedy, who says repair is the act of going back to a moment of disconnection, taking responsibility for your behavior, and acknowledging the impact it had on the other. Now, it's really important to note that this is not the same thing as an apology. Apologies often function as a way to shut down a conversation, and as Dr. Kennedy teaches, a good repair opens one up. We've all seen or experienced well-intentioned but deeply dissatisfying apologies, whether we're watching kids on the playground or we're on the receiving end of a disappointing apology from a friend or family member. Example, someone does something unintentionally hurtful to you and then sends a message saying, "I'm sorry about what happened, I didn't mean to upset you." Or, equally unsatisfying, a generic apology saying, "I want to apologize for anything I may have done to hurt you. I hope you can forgive me." It feels like that apology should be enough, except that it isn't. Those precious words, "I'm sorry," should feel satisfying, and yet they don't. And that's because a real repair has not occurred. Before I circle back to Dr. Kennedy's instructions for repair, it's a good idea to hearken back to the wisdom of another doctor, Maimonides, the 12th century Spanish rabbi and philosopher who wrote an entire treatise on the subject. 4 critical steps constitute repair for Maimonides. First, one must verbally confess their mistake with specificity and ask for forgiveness. Second, one must express sincere remorse, resolving not to make the same mistake again. And here Maimonides offers clear guidance on the importance of our intention when we apologize, emphasizing that for an apology to count, we actually have to mean it. Third, one must do everything in their power to right the wrong, to appease the person who has been hurt by their actions. And finally, one must behave differently if the same situation happens again. Simple, not easy. There are countless barriers that can get in the way of us moving through these critical steps. It's probably not hard for you to come up with any number of excuses, not the least of which, it is really, really difficult to summon the will and courage to confront our guilt and shame and make the effort. Psychological obstacles abound. It's easier to escape, run away from responsibility, or view ourselves as a victim of circumstance than to work through this sort of interpersonal repair. But Dr. Rebecca Kennedy reminds parents in her clinical practice that repair is the number one skill we can teach our kids. And I would extend this to all human beings, whether you are a parent or not. If you're in relationship with other humans, which is to say, all of us, repair is the number one skill we need to live happy, meaningful lives. So how does she map the spiritual and relational work of repair? First, before we make any attempts to reconnect with the person that we may have hurt, we must take the time to begin the repair work with ourselves. It's easiest to do this when we've had some distance from the moment of disconnection, when we're feeling safe and calm. We cannot offer compassion or understanding to others before we find those things in ourselves. Self-repair means separating who you are from what you did. Two things can be true. I'm not proud of what I did, and that mistake doesn't define me. This doesn't mean that my work is done or that I don't have to take responsibility for the harm I caused, but when I'm spiritually grounded in my essential goodness, I'm freed up to behave differently the next time, and I have the energy I need to repair with someone I hurt. I'm a good person who yelled unnecessarily at my kids. I'm a good person who was moving too quickly and caused an accident. I'm a good person who was so focused on the goal at hand, I lost track of how my words landed for another person. I'm a good person who lost sight of what is fair in this situation. You get the idea. Step 2, repair with the other person with sincere words. There's no exact formula. Wouldn't that be great? But a solid repair effort often includes 3 elements. Name what happened, take responsibility, and say what you would do differently next time. Here's an example that may or may not have happened with me and Rabbi Eric. Hey, I keep thinking about what happened the other day when you dropped the glass dish. I'm so sorry I blamed you for what was a total accident. I'm sure that felt awful. I'm working on being more compassionate when accidents happen. Next time, I'll just let you know it's not a big deal and offer to help you clean up the mess. Name what happened, take responsibility, and say what you would do differently next time. I do it with my kids all the time. Hey, sweetie, remember when I totally went off the rails earlier when you refused to get off the computer playing games with your friend? I'm so sorry. I totally went overboard. I was exhausted and worried about the constant pull and presence of screens in your life, and I lost perspective for a moment. I bet it was scary for you to hear me yell and behave out of control. It's true that I set rules about screen time for good reason, and I expect you to abide by the limits I set, but you don't have to be happy about it. Next time I'm frustrated that you're not listening to my request, I'm just going to walk over to you and ask you to finish up, or I'll close the laptop and help you finish up. I know Natan is laughing right now because he knows this speech well. Name what happened, take responsibility, and say what you would do differently next time. I just shared two relatively small examples of disconnection and repair, but I promise you it works on bigger and deeper hurts as well. And here's the great thing. It's never too late. Dr. Kennedy ends her TED Talk with this: how do I know it's not too late? Well, imagine right after this, you get a call from one of your parents, and if neither of your parents are alive, imagine finding and opening a letter you hadn't seen until that moment. And here's the call or letter. Hey, I know this sounds out of the blue, but I've been thinking a lot about your childhood. And I think there were a lot of moments that felt really bad to you. And you are right to feel that way. Those moments weren't your fault. They were times when I was struggling, and if I could have gone back, I would have stepped aside, calmed myself down, and then helped you with whatever you were struggling with. I'm sorry. And if you're ever willing to talk to me about any of those moments, I'll listen. I won't listen to have a rebuttal. I'll listen to understand. I love you. Imagine getting that call or finding that letter even years after the moment of disconnection. Perhaps it wouldn't change everything, but it might change something. But what about after we die? Certainly the gates of repair close when we're no longer here to do it. Yet Jewish tradition challenges even this reasonable assumption. Maimonides wrote, "One who has committed a sin or hurt a friend, and the friend died before the person who did harm could ask for forgiveness, should bring 10 adults, a minyan, to the harmed person's grave, and there say, 'I did such and such. I'm sorry.'" One of my hallmates during my freshman year in college, who later went on to become a rabbi as well, wrote about how this teaching helped her experience repair with her mother 25 years after her mother's death. Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg, who was simply Danya when I met her freshman year, and she was kind of goth, ridiculously smart, and moved through campus with a certain rebellious air. Danya's mother told her that she had cancer 3 weeks after we got to college. She received treatment and got better. And then the summer between our sophomore and junior years of college, they found out the cancer had spread. A few days after she got home from finals in mid-December, the doctors told her that it was time to set up hospice. Danya's parents had divorced a few years earlier, and so the team entrusted with her mom's care included Danya, her aunt, her mother's best friend, and her 24-year-old brother. But mostly it was on Danya and her brother. One night, their mother was in so much pain that they called an ambulance, which took her to the hospital. It was New Year's Eve, and Danya's friends, also home from college, all had tickets to a ska concert. Her brother had plans to go to another party, and their mother, in pain, frightened, and dying, told them that it was New Year's Eve and that they should go out and be with their friends. For years, Danya's greatest regret in life is that she went. She left her mother alone, suffering in a hospital room. Danya carried that shame and regret with her for more than 2 decades. During the height of the pandemic, Danya decided it was time to act on Maimonides' teaching. Since going to her mother's actual gravesite was halfway across the country and gathering in person was impossible at the time, she made her best attempt on Zoom. 10 people from different corners of her life came together in this way, and she told these 10 witnesses the story of her regret that she had been carrying all these years. Danya began to recount the story in a safe and grounded place, in this case, surrounded by dear ones on Zoom. And she told her story and spoke of remorse, and she was able to find a little bit more compassion for herself. She could see how 20-year-old Danya was frightened, overwhelmed, and chose flight as a natural stress response. She could recognize how desperate she was for the respite of a normal night out doing normal college-age things. She could acknowledge that she was there for her mom the next day and for the next 6 weeks of her life, and that she was there with her when she died. But most of all, she could name clearly what she did and the regret she held. She revisited the moment of disconnection and took responsibility for her actions. After she was done telling her story, something else happened. Her friends offered her some other ways to think about that night. Perhaps this was her mother's way of taking the last opportunity to mother them, to release them from something she knew was hard. Perhaps by doing what her mother asked, Danya was able to allow her mom to control the narrative for a bit. Perhaps her mother was sick of being a patient to her caretaker children and wanted some space alone. A moment of disconnection became an opportunity for reconnection. This is repair, real repair, even after someone is no longer in this world. Like so many of you, I watched Rachel Goldberg Poland's eulogy for her beloved son Hirsch, who was held captive for nearly a year and murdered by Hamas just a month ago. I watched the funeral in a muddle of sobs, heartbreak, and awe. Even in the all-encompassing magnitude of her grief after 330 days of traveling the world and tirelessly using her voice and her presence to free her son, she taught us about repair. She said at the funeral, "Hirsch, at this time I ask for your forgiveness. If ever I was impatient or insensitive to you during your life, or neglectful in some way, I deeply and sincerely request your forgiveness. If there was something we could have done to save you and we didn't think of it, I beg your forgiveness. We tried so very hard, so deeply and desperately. I'm sorry." As a rabbi, I've seen repair happen with countless people. I've witnessed it with folks whose loved ones have died. I've seen it with spouses who have had affairs. I've seen it with adult children and their parents. I've experienced it myself, and it's the most beautiful thing on earth. Kintsugi is the centuries-old Japanese art of fixing broken pottery. Rather than rejoin ceramic pieces with a camouflaged adhesive, the kintsugi technique employs a special tree sap lacquer dusted with powdered gold, silver, or platinum. Once completed, beautiful seams of gold glint in the conspicuous cracks of ceramic wares, giving a one-of-a-kind appearance to each repaired piece. This unique method celebrates each artifact's unique history by emphasizing its fractures and breaks, instead of hiding or disguising them. In fact, kintsugi often makes the repaired piece even more beautiful than the original, revitalizing it with a new look and giving it a second life. This is what repair between people looks like too. We don't forget the broken places, the moments of rupture, the experiences of disconnection, but we repair them with something precious, the belief that we can find connection again. Some people think that the point of repair is to fix what you broke. But most of the time, the hurt cannot be undone. So if you can't fix it, why even try? According to our tradition, repair, or teshuvah, has its own intrinsic value. Repairing is ultimately about the process itself. When we choose to name what happened, express remorse, and take account of the harm we caused, even unintentionally, it means something in and of itself, regardless of whether we ultimately receive forgiveness. One of my favorite psychologists and writers, Jewish, Dr. Esther Perel, teaches that repair and reconnection is not a happy ending. It's healing. And even when a happy ending is impossible, we can heal our broken connection with others. And that is almost always possible, except when it's not. It is not always possible to do this repair work with others. I know this from personal experience. Sometimes the other person is unwilling. Sometimes the potential for further harm is too great, and self-protection is a better choice. Sometimes the hurt is too fresh. Sometimes the repair work is simply not possible for now, and that's okay too. None of us are perfect. Some say that the reason we're not perfect is precisely so we can learn how to repair. There's a midrash that teaches that teshuvah was created before the world came into being. It is literally woven into the fabric of creation long before human beings ever came onto the scene. Teshuvah is our birthright and our inheritance. It's part of our very nature. We always have more repair work to do. It is the most important skill we can master, and it is never too late.